Welcome to Living in the Matrix. I'm Jonathan, and I'm left of center.
And I'm Rich, and I tend to lean a little bit more to the right. But the bottom line is together we try to look for the balance of what it means to be human in today's world.
Yeah, let's just get started because I want to jump into this one. Welcome to Living in the Matrix, everyone. I'm Jonathan. This is my co-host, Rich. Say hello, Rich.
Hey, everybody. Great to be back and great to have you back, Sean. We're looking forward to this. It's been almost a year since we had our first podcast together, and looking forward to diving in for sure. Welcome back.
No, awesome to be here. I'm super honored and excited. Thank you so much.
Hey, so your work on Instagram has grown this year. You've done a lot of incredible stuff. Tell me about that because you are producing some of the most unique videos, and your story and your message is so unique. Why don't you tell us about what you've been doing this year?
Yeah, so I don't know what happened. I mean, I know what happened. Like things just start happening. You open up what I call open up your capacity, and then stuff just flows in. And even like my video guy is like, this is crazy because he keeps. I think we've got like 3 or 4 months of bank content that he hasn't produced yet, and I have I have like 20 I haven't put up yet, and I'm like, I guess we'll just keep rocking and see what happens. But it's just something came in, and then I'm like, well, I need to. Well, the something is what I got away from my higher self and started using our higher all, which is interesting, just to play on the words of it. So our higher all just drop something in, and it's just like make this entertaining, make it unique, be and I'm not an art. I would never consider myself like an artist or somebody who would think.
But do you know what you like?
Oddly, it's not even a me thing. I know that I just start speaking things out, and then I've got this awesome video animator guy that he just starts putting the stuff together.
Great.
He's like
amazing, right. Geometry, patterns, connections. Yeah. I mean, it's so cosmic, right? It's pretty, and but it's not distracting. It's definitely gets you drawn in and focused. Yeah. It's incredible stuff.
We do. I mean, it's zero edits ever. I'm like, it's perfect. Go. And so we just go.
I love that.
Then my other guy
time on the last 5%. It's not worth it. It's like just release. I love that plan.
Yeah. It's crazy. So it's been awesome. And then my other guy that does my the face and the live stuff, like he's just like once again just turns them out, and it's not me. It's like it's a us thing, and so it continues to be. The more that I see it as an us thing, we're all creating this together, and I'm like, just bring it to something that everybody wants to see. That you've done this for years, it works, and I'll pay for it if I need to. Well, now he kind of works for me, so like we partnered, and he works in my agency, which is awesome because I have other work. I'm like, well, let's do this stuff. So. It's been just really humbling to watch it all unfold, but I absolutely love it, and the message just keeps getting more clear, and it keeps evolving. And the more that I learn, I'm like, well, nobody's gonna understand this, right? The Rudolf Steiner's way of initiation and the way that they're talking about it. But let me take the principles out of that and work to make it simple. And I'm not the most simple guy to explain things, but at least it's getting clearer as I keep going, which I'm. The more input, the better it gets, and we just keep rocking.
Do you use Rudolf Steiner's language, or do you sort of translate it into your own language? Because you have a unique way of speaking about it.
Yeah. No, I don't use his language. I mean, I'm studying so many different things right now. But I like some of the stuff he talks about, or like I'll, gotten into Rosicrucian teachings lately, or I've gotten into, started studying Knights Templar, and then I got into Carl Jung, and then I'm like, go down another path of reading the Kemetic Principles by, the Metunetter, and then I'm just kind of like, constructing it all together. But I find that got into Hinduism recently and just kind of went down that rabbit hole, and like, what's the architecture and the foundation of that? And the more that I get into,
you learned, like, what stood out to you specifically during that little jaunt and leg,
like with all that stuff
with Hinduism? Yeah.
Just the cycles of time, and then the different ways that they view, from a deity perspective, and how they all have a specific purpose, and they all make up this grander, this grander ecosystem. What led me into it was, I started hearing about these Kali Yuga cycles, and then I'm
Right.
like, oh,
400,000 years.
yeah,
Right.
like what is time, right?
Right.
So,
And it's on January 15th. Okay, there's just going to be this window on the 15th, not the 20th, which is a different window, which is Muhurta. And this is this is what just drives me crazy, because if time is no thing and it's nonlinear, then what is the intensity, and what is the pure exclusivity of finding somebody who knows to find the details, get in that window, and actually get ready for it at that particular period of time. So help me out with that.
Yeah. So there was, I had a client use this the other day. We've left change in the couch for us to get rich, and those little windows of time are just the change in the couch that we left. So we use time in order to give reference to opportunities for consciousness to fold in together. So if we all say, well, this thing is happening on this day and we can all agree on this day, then consensus creates the reality. And then there's an eternalism that then ripples out from that effect. And then at which point it is. So is it really a thing? I don't know. But it can be a thing if we make it a thing. Like, how powerful is the mind that we create the hell in our life and the heaven in our life? So could we not just do that together and create this
collectively,
100%. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to speak to this because I actually had a thought last night as I was walking my dog that I think any polarity, good and evil, male, female, any polarity you create is essentially the discovery of an emotion. Like, thought is primarily language and symbols, but the heart is primarily frequency and chemical reactions. And I think it does it on a spectrum of experience. So all time is the experience of that emotion on a spectrum. The more balanced we are, the easier it is. The more lopsided we are, the more. It's just a new thought that I've been thinking about of what really is time, and time is the experience of that.
Right. Right.
Because it's like how Boss said, it's all a game, and so the time creates the way the game operates.
So if you're at an opera, or if you're, let's say you're at an amazing classical music theater, and there's this Mozart being played, you're intellectually hearing and digitally taking in that, and then your heart moves to tears. You actually weep at the sound of that beauty, right? It's intentional coming from the orchestra, and you're also acquiescing, or at least intellectually, you're actually understanding that too. You're understanding the crescendos and the different notes. So would you not say that that's both? I mean, would you say in that case the heart isn't just an emotion? Because you said that the emotions are in the head and the heart is a vibration. So is that the two coming together?
That's what we call emotion, because an emotion is technically what your brain thinks of the experience. So you think, have a chemical reaction as a feeling, and then it goes back to your head and says, what's this all about? And it interprets the reality. That's your emotion. It's a spectrum of choice between two polarities.
Right. And you could choose the emotion you want to feel.
What's that?
You could choose the emotion you want to feel.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yes.
I agree with that.
And I think that it always begins, the balance of the polarity always begins by the judgment you make of yourself. You have to start from I am love in order to experience the best outcome. And if you get that wrong, that's where chaos is created in your life. And life is about rediscovering that, you've always been I am. That's the fullest potential of love for the self, is I am. And I think, and this is my point that I sent to you. I think we are in a period of time where there is a mass coherence happening between the head and the heart. People are beginning to drop in to their body, mostly men dropping into their body and feeling that sense of coherence, and women are rising to the awareness in their head, and it's bringing coherence. And I'm seeing mass trajectory towards healing, mass level, especially 100%. Gen Z.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we're calling bullshit on the program now.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's the way of saying
it. On the matrix. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the matrix is really our creation. It's nobody created it for us. We created it for ourselves, but we're calling bullshit on the way that we viewed the world. And now we're getting in a space to where, what is that to your point, you said before, the balance. Where's the balance live? To where the present moment of what we're receiving is the intention of its creation, right? So if I can get into that space where I am literally walking in the intention of its creation, then what am I? I'm the creator. But I'm doing it with no ego because I have to receive it. And if I say that I did that, then I'm not receiving it because I'm pushing it away because I'm pointing at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when you
You're
move from
objectifying it.
that's when you move from the what I call the I am state to the we are state. And the we are state is a
The collective.
culmination of all I ams.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then in that place, you're just like, because if somebody says like, then the in the Kabbalah, it talks about, the person that says I am God is completely doomed, because the simple fact that you have now separated yourself from the thing that it is puts you further away from it than you ever could be. Right.
Isn't that part of the path though?
Well, it is part of the path, but that's part of the dip that you get into because there's an ego-ness to the I.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I've always believed that.
Right.
Like pure perfect love is always the collective, the whole, not the parts. Yes.
Yeah, and it's funny, the further that I get into this path, whatever further means, the more that I say we and us, and our, and the less I say I, because I'm like, well, it's not really me. Like even the content that's going out there, it's like it's not really me. It's like quite a
Here's
few
what
other
I hear
people.
you saying is you're trying to transcend your own avatar. Because we create,
Mm.
it's like the man in the mirror is the thing we think we are. It's the reflection of who we think we are. It's just in a mirror, but we're not that. And if we become the true I am, we become part of the whole, the we. Because that's everyone. It's like in the Matrix when what's his name replicated, and
Agent Smith.
Yeah, Agent Smith.
Oh yeah.
Replicated. So we have that capacity. We just do it with different faces and different bodies.
Do you want to hear something crazy? I was just thinking about this just today, just before this podcast, and I just watched The Matrix Reloaded last night. What's crazy about what happened in The Matrix is, and this is what's happening in the real world today, we're seeing all kinds of dichotomies, right? We've got dualistic thinking, Islam versus Jew. We've got left versus right politically, right? Even if you look at the overarching meta narratives that have come before us in terms of Freud, with the id always fighting with superego, you've got Marx, it's the proletariat versus the capitalist and the aristocracy. And even with Darwin, you've got this battle between the survivals of the fittest, the haves, the have not. What was crazy about the Matrix is you had this machine, and it was the Zion against the enemy, right? The Sentinels were coming to actually take this on. What was nuts about what happened was, because Agent Smith actually Neo went into Agent Smith in the first episode and blew him up. And then he realizes, wow, you imprinted something on me, created this third kind of paradigm. And if you finally go to the end of the Matrix in Revolutions, what ends up happening is Neo makes a deal with the actual machine and says, hey, don't kill my folks in Zion. Help me. I need to fight Smith, and we need to take out Smith together. So what ends up happening is the machine stopped digging into Zion, and there's this level where because Agent Smith is still feeling the sense of inevitability of being controlled by a set of controls, he thinks that he sees Neo die. And when Neo actually does die, or at least gets pummeled into obliterate and actually becomes one with the machine, he thinks he won when in fact he loses. So what I'm trying to get with all this is, this we thinking is something I think we need to embrace, because how do we come with that third way, that third path, where we find the common ground within us? Because Jonathan, even though you're saying there's a lot of heart dropping, there's still a lot of divisiveness, and there's a lot of pain, and there's people getting awoken, but they're getting awoken with more hatred in their heart, right? There's a sense of vileness and a sense of it's headspace that sees this awakeness, because they are seeing lies told to them. Like, we're seeing stuff coming out from this government that is blowing people's minds they're not happy with. But at the same time, how do we push that aside and then figure out, going back to even 1000 AD, where Alphonse X, you've got the King of Spain has Jews, Muslims, and Christians all hanging out together, building the Alhambra, doing the kinds of things that they got together with a mysticism and a collective consciousness that was amazing, right? These people all cherished and they learned from each other because they got rid of this dichotomy and this dualistic thinking. So how do we get to that space? That's as a collective.
Mushrooms. I'm
That's
joking.
one way to do it.
I mean, it
joking.
is, yeah.
Not
Half
totally joking on that one, because essentially we need medicine to get us over our own bullshit sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, the medicine allows you to see that which you didn't see, right? So if you only, the medicine allows you to see that which you can't see.
Yes.
So
that's
it's
a
like
great way of saying it.
Yeah. Like the visual spectrum of light is like we see less than 1% of what we can really see. And then when you take some plant medicine, and I'm not endorsing everybody goes out and takes it, because you absolutely need to be in a space to integrate, and that's where people lose it. But
yes,
if when you get involved in it and it allows you to see, let's say me see 2% of the visual spectrum or 10% or 5%, and then you now see something because your senses, whatever it might be, now witnesses it, you can now bring that back into a practice and accountability. And that's what, Christ and the disciples did, is they literally were drinking wine. The wine was not wine. It was not grapes. It was literally mushrooms.
The immortality key. There you go.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
did read the book. We talked about that almost a year ago. The immortality key, right?
Yeah. So it's just like it's in that space of being able to open up that little extra and say, okay, this is reality. Let me bring that into life. And the more of us that do that, the more that it works. But you have to have a responsibility within self to be able to hold the container of what you're now seeing. If I give a 5-year-old a pistol, it's going to do something really wrong with that pistol because it doesn't have the responsibility of it.
Yes.
Especially if its parents are teaching them all kind of crazy stuff and it's watching Yosemite Sam on TV. It's thinking, oh, I'm going to go shoot a rabbit, right? I mean, it's it's that kind of vibe. So we just got to be really mindful of how to integrate and what the responsibility of these tools that can be weapons and that can be healing frequencies either way, because it all works for the greater good when we allow it to. Yeah.
Sean, what's the biggest thing that you've learned so far this year? This feels like that year that it's pivotal. What have you learned so far this year, just from your perspective? It doesn't have to be grand.
Yeah.
But I know your journey a little bit. What have you really picked up?
This like 24 or like in the last 12
Yes.
months? Oh, in 24. Probably I'd say the most impactful thing so far is how the code of this earth, which is the thing that birthed us into reality, is giving us all the information we ever need.
Yes.
And it shows up really different than it ever has before. But I sense that we're all witnessing it. Like when it rains, I'm like, oh, we're purging. Like there's something about the rain that it's not just rain anymore. Or there's something about like when I see 2 sets of birds, I'm like, oh, well, I know what that means. Crazy stuff like, the numerology, or even now I'm doing stuff with letters to where I'm decoding those into numbers like automatically, and I'm seeing what those things mean. Everything is a message. The sequencing, and like when I feel the wind, it's not just the wind, right? It's some aspect of resistance that I'm feeling from the world around me that I can't see. And what is that? I can take it as wind, but there has to be something that created the wind itself. And so therefore, what am I actually receiving when that wind hits me?
It's an electrical event. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something's
So
happening.
all of that, all that's a sign and all that's a thing. And so, I went down this deep rabbit hole of this winter solstice and, dug into some other stuff. And I was like, oh, well, this means that the earth is more awake, right? But we think the earth is more awake in the summertime. No, humans are awake. We're moving around. The soul of the earth is wildly awake in the wintertime. And it's our time to actually surrender, be quiet, and receive that information. So I noticed like in the last month, it was kind of just like a slower, I would say me just doing stuff like, where I'm not really out there but I'm receiving like shit tons of downloads. I think I have like 50 pages of notes of things that I've just written, and it's all just from the field. Like it's all from the field and not this untouchable quantum field. It's the actual thing that I'm seeing. Like now the earth, this conversation, everything that I'm witnessing is like quantum. Everything on my desk right now has a very specific code to it, why it's there, and it's something for me to receive. And it's not even an overthinking of it. I don't really think about it. It's just like, oh, I know what
Well,
that, I get it.
everything good has meaning. Absolutely. It has from the highest perspective, everything has meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just finishing. All right, I just listened to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and he reminded me that we create the experience of life by our view of it. That if we we can only choose what we experience inside, not outside.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
hold that becomes a very meaningful experience to realize, hey, everything does have meaning. And it's
Mm-hmm.
there. You just have to discover it. I love that about you because you are intentional like that. You create that idea. And that is a choice that we can all make to create meaning out of things. And
Yeah.
you're listening to, hey, it's tied to something much deeper. Let's listen. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the
Yeah.
things we've discovered when you don't have a lot of food is you savor that. It's very common in Buddhist tradition to meditate as you eat. And Americans, I mean, we're scarfing down double cheeseburgers, right, with extra raw onions in about 2 minutes, right? Because that's the
Yeah.
way we roll. And to be able to think about the food and then knowing there's not a lot, you're chewing and masticating it down, which in turn actually is better for your body too. So one of the things we, as this group that's gone through this program, has appreciated more is just the nature of being mindful about how it's going into your body and chewing it and then and actually feeling it actually provide energy to you. So I love that what you elucidated right there, Sean.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you.
Keep on.
I've seen a lot of things out on the ether that deal with ascension. I mean, we do talk about people becoming more awake, but Jonathan, we had Cleburne talk about ascension and a planal shift. So we had a podcast guest on named Cleburne who has tapped into his pineal gland and felt like by tapping into the Christ oil, which is something that starts with the fluid in the pineal gland, goes down to the sacrum, goes all the way back up again, kind of as an antenna. He's seen what we would describe as the rapture is actually just a planal shift, right? That we're going to be elevated to a different place than others. But believe it or not, Virginia talked about this interdimensional shift. Jonathan, Dolores Cannon has talked about this. There's a guy named Keb on Twitter talks about ascension through aliens and Pleiadians. Have you heard of Pleiadians out there, Sean? I
Yeah.
don't know if you have. Okay, cool.
Familiar.
And what's crazy is all these people are talking about this planal shift, but it's coming from a lot of different perspectives. So there's got to be something going on, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got all these little paths, and if we're all kind of aiming towards the same goal, it doesn't matter really how you get there. If it's collective and the consciousness is there, it doesn't really matter to the path, I don't think, right? So what do you think about this idea of a planal shift, and what are you hearing in the ether about that? And maybe it's something similar to being awake or not. I'm not sure.
I think there's two paths. There's always two paths, right?
Okay.
one path is that we are already ascended. We already ascended. It's already done.
Yeah.
Good.
We just haven't actually. We don't believe that we are.
Got it.
And so part of it is that once we start knowing that beyond the belief that we could have that this thing is happening, we have to prove to ourselves. The funky thing about humanity is that we look at the logic and the linearness of the proof that needs to happen in order to actually make a change or a shift. And, miracles that happen that are truly miracles, they don't have a logical timeline to them. There's no logical structure of how like human beings are created. I mean, really? Like there's a penis and a vagina and some sperm and some eggs, and you could try to like back this thing up, but like that whole thing is a kind of magical process. It's not like you can just go do that in a lab and you can math your way into it. Right. So if that's the case, and we've always had these little miracles that are always happening in our life, as simple as birth, then when you look at the human body is a true reflection of ascension. And what I mean by that is that when we make the decision as a collective of human beings, because we're all individual cells in this entire big machine, right? Called the Matrix, the Earth, humankind. And my purpose is, I might be a me cell on the entire body. You might be a head cell or forehead, and some, Rich, you might be the chin. It doesn't really matter what part we are, but we all have a very specific role to play, and we all have a very specific purpose. We often look at the other cell and say, shit, that looks really cool to be the head. And so I want to do that. And that's where our separateness comes in. And that's why we create this cancerous world that we live in, because we're not recognizing that we're all one big unit on the body. So now the ascension is that when I look at myself, if my nose stops being a nose, then my nose will fall off, right? If my hands stop being a hand, they know their purpose. They do their thing. And they do it with all the love and the vigor at the subatomic particles, at the Planck scale. The vacuum fluctuation of that energy is just as much as in the universe, and it is fully functioning. And my body is a full representation of that reality, right? So my body is a representation of ascension. And if my body is a representation of ascension, then all I have to do is say, I just need to stand in my purpose and do the thing that everything in my body does on an ongoing basis that we fight against. Like, we are like, nah, you're not supposed to do that. I'm going to go and change something, or I'm going to, do something stupid to myself, whatever it might be, or not take care of this vessel. But the body still does it. It still figures it out, right? Mm-hmm. Until we beat it into submission and it dies. But the thing about ascension is that we have the ability as human beings to actually fully surrender into our purpose. And at which point, when that happens, there will be a shift. Yes, there'll be a shift to where there will be us that just kind of like move into this organism. I don't know what it's going to be, what it's going to look like, but we'll move into some organism, something, some structure that will transcend time and space. These things will not exist anymore. Technology will completely shift, and we'll start moving interdimensionally all over the place as like one big unit of function. And it's already happened. We just keep playing with the concept of time to think that we have to do some crazy ass meditation to get there. And that's cool because it's part of the path, right? But it's also one of those things that there's going to be like this whipping in time to where like every thought we have creates a reality. There's going to be different structures and apparatuses that we live in that like literally ascend humanity in this state of we are oneness that is no longer a name, and we are completely unborn, and we are eternally evolving. And that to me is this ascension process that has already happened. We just keep fucking around with it to try to figure out, is it really real or not? I don't know.
So but where does that leave you? Like, how do you address that, knowing that how do you address that for yourself, knowing that kind of idea exists in your head?
Because it's, there are, all of us have a purpose, right? So if I recognize that and I know that, and we all have the power to move the mountains, you also know why it's there. And there's a requirement for all of us to be able to get into the path of surrendering. And if, let's say, for instance, I touch one person, and that person now has the ability to touch 1 million, and I was just as impactful as the one that touched the 1 million. My ego would say I need to be the one that touches the 1 million because I want to be the guy. Yep. But I'm not. If that happens, that's great. If it doesn't happen, it's great. But it's like, how can I impact? I mean, if you think about Jesus touched, not that many people. Okay. Yeah. Realistically, Moses touched, quite a few, but not that many people. It wasn't like millions we didn't have social media. We didn't have any of these things, but the stories live on like crazy because of the truth that person was able to stand in, and what I would love to see and then put out there is the true stories of Christ where, him being a fuck off between 18 and 32, right? And the vulnerability. Let me stop
for a quick second on that one, because we had people on who talked about him. Do you think he went to the East during that period?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, went to that's the East. The context that we were exploring, and we do too. So it changes the narrative of Jesus, because it means he brought to the East back to the, he 100%. Brought them together. He brought the head and the heart together.
There's even stories he married a lady named Miriam, and they were married from 18 to 25 and for 7 years, and then she passed away. Like, there's all this stuff that, is out there. But I mean, there were mistakes. There were things. Nobody's a perfect human being, but that Christ consciousness, that Messianic consciousness that he was able to pull in allowed for him to ascend, right? And once he recognized it, he's like, okay, I get it, but I'm here. So like the monks that get it, but they're also here, a lot of them are like, look, I just don't want to do that. Like, I'm going to go sit in the thing and do the thing and energetically connect and go through my process. But there are those of us that are here to bring it to the world. There's those of us that are here to touch 1 or 2 or 10 or 10 million, doesn't matter. And you know that the time is a game and it's already happened. Therefore, you can actually just see everything as love. And that's the ascension process.
Do you think that Joel Osteen is a good example of that kind of person?
I think
don't know.
he doesn't get enough credit. I think he knows more than people give him credit for.
Yeah, I haven't really studied his I mean, I've heard him speak. I think he's fantastic. But I don't know too much about his like what he really is deep about.
A lot of his detractors would say he's Christianity light, but he definitely, I mean, we had a Tao priest on who thought he was amazing, and he actually kind of talked about not hypnotics in a pejorative sense, but he said the way he talks and the way he communicates has an amazing ability to and capture a lot of people, right? So I just was curious in that particular framework on that. So
well, it showed up for a reason. I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, so a couple of days ago you had this amazing meditation, and you said in this meditation it was designed to kind of get people kind of focused, and that which is real is that which is eternal, so that which is truth is that which is real.
Yeah.
That which is real is that which is eternal, so that which is truth is that which is real. So Jonathan and I have always said if something is true, it has to be. Did we say it? It has to be, if something is true, Jonathan, isn't that always true? It doesn't have to be, isn't it always true? It kind of has an eternality to it, right? So that which is real is that which is eternal. So that which is truth is that which is real. So can you unpack that a little bit for me? Because it's profound and it starts to make sense. And then
was it on his video?
Yeah, it was on the video. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. I remember I was doing that. And it just kept coming through, and I'm like, "Fucking,
you just went with what you were downloading." Is that what?
Yeah, I don't know what it means. I mean, I know what it means. I know what it means. I'm not saying I don't know what it means, but at the time, I was like, "This is so damn
Didn't
confusing."
mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, I mean, so it's what is truth, right? Number one, everything has everything that we witness because it's not eternal isn't true, right? So it's like if I'm looking at anything that's in my peripheral right now is not eternal. Nothing. Like even a tree. Like there's nothing that is eternal. So therefore it's not real. Okay. Now, so if that's what is truth is that which is eternal, and then essentially that which is real also has to be true. So then in that kind of context of putting that whole sentence together is that recognize what's eternal around you and surrender constantly into that so that you can walk into a different reality. And then if you can recognize the only thing that is eternal in your life is the soul that you are in, right? And the souls that are around you, then that's the reality that we should be constructing off of. And then working in that reality instead of working in the reality of, let me go and, do this work. Like, of course, do the work because it's part of the process that you're in. But that's one of those things that's like a byproduct of the entire thing. So how can I incorporate and really integrate with the souls around me? And in a way that isn't a spiritual vampire or being, degrading or pulling individuals down or hurting somebody. That's the sauce, right? Like that's the stuff that we are going to continue to surrender into. And that to me just makes a big shift in how you view things because you don't take anything personal at that point. You're like, all right, well that happened,
What's been the valuable part of seeing yourself as the we to that integration of I am the we? What's been the value of that? Because I love that idea. I understand that what you're talking about because there's a greater collective that we are.
You accept everything. You accept everything and you say everything. You see everything with just extreme gratitude.
Yes.
You see everything with wild reverence and you love everything, even the stuff that you probably shouldn't, like according to society. Because you know that it's part of we. Like if we are God and we are the whole thing, then nothing that happens It's all an initiation, and you don't take it personal. And I mean, and I can imagine the most horrific things happening. Like, say something were to happen to, you know, a very close friend of mine, or fiance or son or parents, whatever it might be. We take that personal.
Yeah.
And that's okay to take it personal, because it's part of the grieving process, it's part of the up and down. But it's also one of those things. It's like pain. Their soul is the real thing. Their soul is the eternal thing. And can I love their soul beyond their body? And one thing that we've done in looking at all of these beautiful prophets and deity, like not deities, but the prophets and everything,
avatars of sorts, right?
Yeah, we love their soul beyond their body. We love what the soul represented, that was the eternalness, not all the other broken pieces of them, because I'm sure they all had problems, right? But we love the legacy, the journey, the reality of what they were creating, and that's the real thing.
Well, we love Peter so much because he was so broken, right? Here's a guy who watches Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, right? He's hanging out with James and John, and he sees the living Christ coming through in his glory. And then the next thing you know, he cuts off the servant's ear because he forgets what Jesus came for. And then he's denying him 3 times, right? Right there before the crucifixion. And so we're thankful that we have somebody who could open mouth and put in foot, but realize at the end of the day that his heart was in the right place. But we get to suffer with him, right? We get to make these mistakes and realize that grace is real, and we're thankful for that, right? And I think that you look at the prophets, you got a guy, I mean, for heaven's sake, Elijah calls down fire, up on the prophets at Baal, Mount Carmel, Jonathan, and then runs away from Jezebel, right? So here he is calling down freaking fire, like on this altar. He made a little joke with the priests, and he said, okay, why don't you put water, no, he says, try to light the fire. I don't know what happened. I think he asked them to put water all over the place. They couldn't light this thing on fire. And then he goes, maybe your God's pissing, have taken a leak someplace, and then all of a sudden he does it and he calls it down. So everything's consumed, and he's the badass of the day. And then next thing you know, the next day he runs away from Queen Jezebel, And so you have things like that. I think that's what I also love about the Bible. I think you love the Bible too, in many regards. And you called it the most dangerous book, in fact, because of the reflection of what happens. And I just love this, Sean, because Jonathan, I got to tell you how many times as an apologist for the Calvinistic side of things in faith, when I would open up that Bible, the first thing that I would start doing was I would looking for those verses that would justify my position. And what a fucked up thing is that, right? Instead of looking at the light. It's looking at the light of the Spirit that goes into those words, and using them instead of light, you're using them for, at least a backhanded slap to say, I've got the upper hand. And but thank God you've got so many, people just screwing up in the Bible, right? Even David, right? Just what a mess. He's a murderer, he's an adulterer, right? And yet at the end of the day, he had that heart. So I just love that we've got these stories,
Yeah, I do too.
Sean, let me ask you a question. What do you feel is the responsibility of this awareness? And do you look at it as, oh, I should go create this thing that makes it happen? Or are you taking an approach that says, I'm just going to be in the moment and do whatever that is? Which one are you leaning towards?
That's a great question.
That is a great question. So it's, for me, it's moving away from any efforting and really into a receiving. I was reading do some like working with the Kabbalistic teachings right now, and kind of going through that and studying that entire tree of life, and going from Keter all the way to Malchut, and what all those things mean. And we were all born to just receive the light, right? But the reality of it is that if I was born with a silver spoon, I'm never going to appreciate it. And so, to your point, in this whole process, that I used to want to be like, I want to go save the world, and let's go fix everybody, and let's, I wrote out these different stages of consciousness that we go through, because what I started to notice is like my old ego, is kind of toward the October of last year, I saw these people just start popping off, and I'm like, well, shit, my stuff is just as good, if not better. That's kind of what I was thinking. And I was like, wait a minute. What am I saying right now? And I'm like, you know what? Everybody, there's something for everybody. For those that have ears, let them hear. They're going to hear the thing that they need to hear at the time, and it might not be my message, but I know that my message might impact the person that's like crushing it with somebody else out there, right? And as long as we are helping individuals walk through those different those steps and up that ladder, that's what's important. So the responsibility for me to go out and be like, I got to shift the whole thing, not me. It's a we thing. So it took me right back to the we thing once I realized that there's no I or me that I have to do anything. But what ends up happening is the more that I receive and widen my vessel, the more that the instructions roll in and the more people show up in my life that literally are the stepping stones for me to continue to walk down, and they guide me. So now when people show up in my life, I am in absolute awe and reverence because they are literally a guide that I've created for myself to take me down a path in order for us to do something together. And that feels so much different than me sitting here like, okay, I got to come up with the plan and figure it out. This is how we're going to change the world. But it all works. It's like, oh, well, I got a guy that's building out a whole like conscious community mystery school. I got another one over here that's building this thing called In Life. There's another guy over here that's building another thing. And I'm just part of it and I'm in it. And, individuals like, how do you do so much stuff? It's like, I'm just kind of like flowing. I'm just moving like the water. How does the water
pick up the next problem?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You just kind of go. Yeah, exactly.
Well, you were really also talking earlier about how the hand does what it's supposed to do and the nose does what it's supposed to do. And when they're supposed to do what they're supposed to do, you don't even think about it, right? And that's the kind of beauty of it.
The rhythm, though. That's what the
ego
does. The ego wants to be this big light and say, look at me, when being part of the we gives you what you actually want. That's the joke of it, is the ego never realizes, because it can never let go, that the very thing, the fulfillment from we, is the very thing that I seeks. And I'm realizing, God, I've created this Jonathan avatar for myself, and I'm learning to let it go. Like, really, what happens if I don't stay alive? Like, what happens in 3 generations? It's like, it's not as big of a deal as my amygdala wants it. The reality is that I'm not going to experience it anyways. And who knows? Because now I'm realizing we are energy. We always continue.
Law of conservation of energy, 100%.
Understanding quantum physics basically was the greatest validation of what Christ consciousness was. That to me is that's the thing, is this Jesus guy actually created this idea, or exposed it, that if you just love, life gets really good. And he created this idea of the way, and just gave simple language to it. And we've been playing around it for like 2,000 years. And I think it's waking up.
Yeah. Well, there's like three things that I'll kind of speak to it around this, like this Christ consciousness. So like one of them is what I've noticed in when I reread it. I've like reread, different stories of Christ, and I started watching The Chosen the other day because I got a client that's involved in it. I'm like, oh, this is great. Is that one thing that Christ did is never use his gifts to save anybody. He only used his gifts to show other people how to save themselves.
Yes.
And like when I was looking at the deal in the where he's feeding the individuals, and he's like, the disciples went and sat with that'd be great. The disciples went and sat with individuals in these groups and pods, and it was taking the teachings and going and showing other individuals, and it's like, oh well, they all got fed. What do they get fed? I mean, we could say it's bread, it's this, and so on and so forth. But when we know the symbology of the bread and the blood, or the bread and the wine, and what they actually had, it wasn't the food; it was the information and the knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Feeding them the knowledge was the thing that came in. Now, what does the ego do? The ego says, well, shit, I don't deserve this. I'm not worthy of it. So I need to look at this guy as the king. He's the guy that did it. Jesus is the guy. And then they revered him instead of revering themselves as the ones that were creating. And he kept pointing people back to that. Yeah. And so there's that aspect of it. And then what that led me to is then going deeper into some, like I delved into this Rudolf Steiner thing even further, where he was talking about the Jehovah and Aramonic. Have you studied Ahriman and Lucifer and how all this stuff works?
Tiny bit.
Not Ahriman. I've always hold the Luciferian is the light bearer, right?
Yeah.
In terms of Masonic stuff, I mean, I mean, there's a lot of people who don't think that Lucifer is actually a bad guy. He's actually,
but do you know the two characters?
Not the second guy. I only know the Luciferian one that your son's
So,
talked about him a lot.
If Lucifer is the light bearer, who's the dark bearer?
Satan.
But don't a lot of people say Lucifer is Satan?
Not in Masonic terms. No, they differentiate the two.
Well, what's your point?
And then, so Ahriman is like so basically you have two different devils, which are the extensions of polarity at both ends, right? You've got the light and you've got the dark. You've got all as dark as it could possibly be. You've got as light as it could possibly be. If you go all the way into the dark, you're blind. You go all the way into the light, you're blind. Both of them are problematic. Okay. Mm-hmm. So
the polarities are always where the chaos is.
Yeah. Luciferian energy lives on the extensions of ether, air, and water. We can call it Satan or we can call it Ahrimanic energy. Either way, sits inside of the core materialism, the matter, and what's actually in this world. There's a threshold. They either call it Abraxas, Messianic energy, Christ consciousness, whatever you want. That is the gateway that allows the Jehovah and the ether, air, and the water to then translate into what we call the mineral or the material space of this world.
Hold on a second. Is that the moment
that's alchemy?
Energy becomes matter? Is that point?
That's the point when, it comes in and then it translates into reality. Now, the thing is the Jehovah energy will never touch the matter. It has to go through the gateway of this consciousness or this threshold or the Abraxas or the this threshold energy that sits there. And the ascension process is us being able to hold the space of pulling in the light, loving the darkness, bringing the light into the darkness, and being able to paint the picture of our creation, which we do that in a microspace and we do that in a macrospace. You go to the law of correspondence. It's our cells do that inside of our body as well as we do that, but we just do it with like fucked up thoughts sometimes. And then there's more, right? And so we are constantly walking in that space. We just don't see it all as love, and we choose a side, which is why a lot of spiritual individuals get lost in the light. They're like, oh, like what I've noticed a lot of billionaires and millionaires that I talk to, not that many billionaires out there, but I've talked to a handful. They start getting into spirituality, and they're like, oh, I just got to go do the light thing because they've conquered the materialism. So what do they do? The pendulum swings to the right as much as it swings to the left. Now they go chase light. They get lost in the light.
Interesting.
Is that like an Anthony? Would you say Tony Robbins is like that? He seems to be always in the light, always in the positive side. Would you say that that's an example of his thought?
I think Tony's kind of balanced.
Oh, yeah, he is too. Yeah.
Can you give an example of somebody who's gone into the light who wants to stay in the light side of things? Just as an example.
No, he's an integrator. I mean, I would say that he integrates and he can impact. He's more balanced. Like other individuals that I've noticed is like they get on the journey and then they go chase the light and they're in plant medicine ceremonies every week. They are like you see a lot of actors, like, Will Smith's done like 80 some, I don't know, I mean, hundreds of ayahuasca ceremonies because he's trying to escape this thing. But he was able to master the material space. Like he was able to, and that's like when you sign a deal with the devil, whatever you want to call it. It's like, I'm going to not be in the light in order to then make a deal. And I did that at one point. I was like, I'll make a deal with the material space. Right. And I want to crush it. But what happens is when our intention is meant for so much more, we never able to keep it. And it just like comes and goes. And some of us make that deal to where we want to keep it. And so we ignore the light. And once consciousness pulls us up into a space, the responsibility of those that have made that deal are going to have to relinquish it. And there'll be just this like massive purging, which is, I anticipate some weird financial crisis that is going to force people to let go of their money. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It will shift into something else. And then at which point, it will be democratized for the masses so that we can all live in the abundance of ourselves and quit worrying about all this nonsense.
Do you think that happens quickly or over like a decade? What's your feeling on that?
Well, that's a relative
I know
thing.
It's a guess, but
it could be, it could be very quick. It could.
I do too. I think it could be very, very quick.
Yeah, very, very quick. Yeah. I mean, you can see the signs. I mean, we're already gearing up for, central bank digital currency. Bitcoin is now a commodity, so we literally have a thing that's created off of energy that's now currency that is now a commodity. and it's starting to translate so that it can back up this actual digital currency that's going to show up. It's no accidents, right? When that happens, all of the standards of the material ways that we've seen the world, it'll translate from this thing that we could hold and see to something we can't hold and see anymore. And then we're just going to have to trust in the process. It's letting go of the gold standard, the dollars, the things along those lines, and saying, okay, well, this is the thing that we're going to have to lean into.
Yeah,
Be
I don't
really
know if you
interesting.
guys heard this, but I just heard. I didn't even know about this, but I guess we had two destroyers in the Red Sea that were attacked. We were trying to guard some cargo because there's a lot of money, a lot of revenue, a lot of trade that goes in between that, and we had to turn around because the Houthis were launching drone strikes at our destroyers, right? So we turned tail. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening. I was like, whoa, this is getting serious, right? You've got a movie called Civil War coming out by
I want to
E41
see.
Productions. And it's like, okay, we really have a civil war brewing literally on our border right now. You can't fucking make this stuff up. And it's literally all written out for you. You got Don't Leave the World Behind that came out a few months ago. And sometimes it feels like we're still freaking scripted, and so and to think and to feel like the writing's on the wall with, I mean, China's looking like it's having a hell of a time with its own currency and stuff. So, but that being said, right, we still have this imperative to live our best lives and to collect with each other. And I think there's ways to rise above this and to vibrate higher than the shit crashing around us, and that's, I think,
Yeah.
how we get through it together.
Yeah. And what's going to be interesting is seeing the world in, like, whenever you interpret dreams, the dream is not the way that it's not the way that we think it is. So, my fiance was having a conversation about a dream the other day where she was like looking for her mother, right? Well, it's not the fact that you're looking for your mother, right? It's something else inside of that. So, like, when we went a little bit deeper into it and what that meant, it was the fact that she was looking for the divine feminine within her. So when we start to move from this logical world to the magical world, the way that we'll have to read it is not the way that our minds can contact. Like, it's not the way that we can make sense of it. It's going to be like, oh, well, this stuff is happening over here. Oh, it's doom and gloom. No, it's actually purge and release. So when we look at that as like a loving
That's
aspect
the
of things, it
positive
starts
side
to
of it.
shift the energy. Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It just shifts the energy. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, now the currency system over in China is off. Well, but then all of a sudden the currency and the peso is going bananas in Mexico. Well, it's not as it seems, right? There's something within that, but there's what's happening is individuals are getting rewarded for being in their hearts. One thing I notice in, like, when I go down to Mexico is, the way they put value on themselves tied to money isn't the same as it is over here. And they will work their ass off, and from an integration perspective. So their ability to integrate and get stuff done is pretty solid. The problem is they don't get rewarded for it. So now what's
Mm.
happening is the currency and the energy is starting to basically reward them, whether we like it or not. And those that aren't doing the integration, they're actually losing value. Like, it's really interesting watching all these things kind of like shift, and it's a correction. Yeah.
Well, you just naturally, I mean, I live in Southern California, right? And so I am used to, and you're in LA half the time, right? LA and New York, right? You spend some time between both coasts. So we see, these poor guys out at 4:30 in the morning. We're having a holiday and they're out there at 5 o'clock picking stuff out there all the time, sending multiple generations here to work their asses off to send them home. I mean, even one of the congressmen was kind of saying, well, who's gonna, you know, wash your car and do all this stuff. And like, oh, it was supposed to be a kind of a, you know, it was supposed to be a bagging on Republicans. And here she is saying, who's going to, take care of all these things. And in fact, there was a movie called A Day Without a Mexican, right? So maybe it is time for that shift, Sean. And when you say that integration, are you saying that the hard work they're doing somehow is being tied also to their heart? That's why you're seeing this peso valuation increase and their wealth immediately get better? Or what kind of integration are you talking about for the Mexican people?
Yeah. So I mean, it's more of the fact that they are, yeah, it's the hard work. So, like, what's happening now is that, in this stage of the Keter to the Malhut and going to the tree of life, it's going to the root, right? So
Yep.
everything energetically is
Foundation.
going to the root, it's
Yep.
emptying down. When what we've done historically is we've honored this, right? We've honored overly intellectual thinking. We've honored a bunch of ideation. We've rewarded that, but we haven't rewarded the integration of that. And those that can even lightly integrate become wildly successful. Okay. So now there's aspects of how we are honoring this earth, the work that we're doing physically here, which is why like old people used to get mad. And they're like, there's these people don't even know how to work anymore, because that blood, sweat, and tears and that integration of like actually truly working from your emotions down is a big difference. And when you work with passion and you put your feelings into what you're doing and you bring it from your heart, that has to move from here down. They're not thinking about it. It's almost like a constant meditation. When they're out there doing it and just getting it and going and doing that rhythmic work, it's like a meditation, but it's coming from here down. And so energetically, it starts to then shift the dynamic of the way that, currencies and whatnot are being reintegrated back into this world. And then you're starting to see like this valuation take off in the peso. That's like, it's actually pissing really rich. Like I have some, Mexican friends down there that do really well, and they're like, "Fuck, this is messing up my whole system," because like it's just popping off, and their valuation is going up. But it's funny to see, but it's who it's rewarding is those that are working hard, those that have been sitting on it and leveraging the dollar against the peso, and kind of like using it for their benefit. It's actually hurting them because they've been working from this space and trying to logic their way around it instead of the other way around. And it's quite interesting to see.
Hey, Sean, I realized a question I wanted to ask you for a long time is help our audience understand, because you prolifically talk about this, the difference between 3D, 4D, and 5D.
Yeah. So 3D is, I can go through the dimensional kind of breakdown of it, but so the third dimension is really a space of time understanding. It's what we call the spark, right? So there's the Trinity in it. It's understanding what experiences are like tied to time. And it's, there really is no plan in it. I mean, it can have a plan drop into it, but there's really no plan in it. It's just kind of like a being and an experience. The 4D is what I call, and some people can disagree with this, it's the bridge to your higher consciousness, this 5D consciousness that we can get into. And you have to go through, so when you start going through trials and issues and problems in life and so on and so forth, and there are the devils that you have to overcome, whether it's the devil of the light or the dark, whatever it might be, it's the bridge that you have to walk over, right? And so in that bridge that you have to walk over, once you pass it, it entitles you. You become worthy, because you have to go through those stages of being able to receive. That's not just like the silver spoon being handed to you. So you have to go through that. And once you get to the 5D, you can now start seeing everything as love. And it's a choice, because we're not going to stay in 5D, because there's a whole world for us to experience here in 3D that is tied to these time experiences that not everybody's out of, and we're all part of the same body. So therefore, what's my responsibility? My responsibility is that I can go and grab information and I can bring it back across. And every time I go back and across this threshold of this fourth dimension, I'm going to be challenged and tested, because you know what? There's going to be a troll on that bridge that pops up and says, "Hey, pay the toll. What do you need to do here?" And it's going to be an initiation for me to stay in the truth of what I know, to say that 5D is so important, but I also know that I have a responsibility to work in this world. And so it's like a bridge between the two. And then once you're there in the 5D, it's that, okay, well, then there's a plan that you can connect to in the sixth dimension, where God is basically pulling you and your plan into yourself. And this is the information that you can receive, which is why when we get downloads and we get in that really high state, is the plan of God dropping right into you. And you now have the ability to translate that into the third dimension. And now you're walking with the plan in your life, and you're also able to translate that for others.
That is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful, brother. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks, man.
Thank you. I've never heard that. It was eloquently put.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if a microcosm of that is when Paul was able to enter in that third heaven, he came down from it, and then he got this thorn in his side, and he asked God for the thorn to be gone, and he goes, "No, my grace is sufficient for you." And I've always wondered, like, what the hell happened up in that third heaven? Because we know that he's fucking amazing. I mean, outside of Jesus, Paul is pretty much would you say, Jonathan, in Christianity, the second most important person that kind of walked the face of the earth, besides, who else besides?
That would put David ahead of Paul.
You put David ahead of Paul in terms of
Well, David was
Christianity?
the heart, Paul was the
Yeah.
mind. Yeah. So,
But I mean, but I always often thought that's the troll. There's a thorn here that says, no, dude, you've been up there. This is your grounding.
Yeah.
You have this going on just so you can remember all the time. You know what's here. You need to share it. And when you feel that pain, that's your groundedness in what's going on in this 3D. I think that's amazing, man.
you know what a
Amazing.
lot of people don't even think about is Paul was basically silent for 15 years. So he didn't just go run out and do all this stuff. He basically probably experienced a lot of shit in his head for 15 years trying to overcome his own I mean, he was a brutal person. And
He
then
was.
learn, because the journey is ultimately the only person I have to deal with is me. And so for Paul, he had to deal with the fact that he saw Jesus, had a physiological real experience, and it completely blinded him. What do you do with that kind of experience? And it took him a long time probably to forgive himself.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is that, the blinding and even the silence, it's a hell of a Vipassana retreat, right? I mean, it's literally, it's literally like, you take away, if he's overly cerebral, then let me remove what you can see. He did it for himself. I'm going to remove what I can see, and I'm going to remove the actual thing, and I'm going to go within, and I'm going to sit within that. And if you think about the 15, the 1 and the 5 to 6, right? It's the 6 is the plan of God. He's literally pulling in the plan of God through that period of time, culminating that over a course that, is a 6. It's kind of interesting when you look at it.
Yeah.
Sean, did you see Book of Clarence?
I didn't know. Should I?
Yes, it's very unique. Lakeith Stanfield is my favorite actor, and the director who did it. It's basically the 13th apostle tries to be like Jesus and ends up discovering he is I am. It's a phenomenal story. It's not perfect in terms of that he has a comedic element to it that doesn't quite work, but the story is phenomenal. I think you'd absolutely love it.
Book of
Because it's
Clarence. All
all
right.
about a human being who's completely doubting, arcing all the way over to completely believing. He says, and the end is, I don't believe, I know.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And the
I'll have to check.
knowing, the gnosis is that final state of the arc to know I am. It's a
Is it
phenomenal
in?
story.
Is it on? Is it
It just
on?
came out
It's
in the
on
theaters.
stream.
It's still probably in theaters.
Okay, I'll have to go see
Wow.
it.
I never heard of
Yeah,
that. Got
it's
to give it a
really
try.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right.
I remember this trailer. Actually, I've been wanting to see this. Okay. I just
yeah.
looked it up real
It's
quickly.
unique. It's unlike any movie you've probably ever seen, and that's what he was trying to go for. It's kind of wild. So
Yeah.
I'd be curious to
Amazing.
hear your thoughts on it after you see it.
Okay. Yeah. I'll check it out.
All right.
Hey, what's your plans for this year?
Oh, man.
Like, what's the thing with your awareness to where is Sean bringing 5D back to 3D this year? Is there any thought process that's kind of resonating?
I don't say I have a plan. I'd say I'm very intentional in the now. And as I've done this, it's like the plan is architecting itself with me.
So what's showing
And
up right now for you?
oh man, all the intentions that I said at the end of last year have almost all happened within the
Nice.
first 25 days of the year, which is crazy. Had hey, we want clients that are values aligned, every single one of them. Landed a huge client for around
Myosin.
spirituality, and it's like, oh, okay,
Hmm.
this is great. All those things are locking in. Being able to truly stay in the integrity of what that means. And so I had a potential client the other day that I'm like, oh, this guy built all this amazing technology around taking 5,000 years of learning and putting it into an app. And there was an initiation that I was basically, I could have made a lot of money on him if I took the plan that he wanted me to execute on. I said, look, I can't work with you this way. I have to work with you in a way that's going to grow your business, not in a way, because he got pitched by another group at the same time. And they wanted him to do this thing that was all glitz and glamour, but that was not effective. But I would have made a lot of money on it. I said, I'll work with you if you do this thing. I was like, I can't do that. I could, but it would be out of integrity of me knowing that I would be helping you. And so, I mean, it was a pretty significant thing, and I let it go, but it was beautiful to just be able to let that go. And then as soon as I did, something else came in. So had I done the planning thing, it would have been like, oh, this is revenue. This is a thing. I want to do this and then help these people in this business. But I didn't take it. And then literally right after that, 10 times the blessings came in. So I'm in the space of constantly being just delighted and receiving what that delight looks like, even in the choice of turning away from something that Sean even 5 months ago would have been like, yeah, let's go, let's get it. So there's that. I would say that when it comes to, this, how we all awaken together, it's just getting with individuals and creating different apparatuses and areas of momentum that allow people to just be entertained by consciousness, to find different lanes to find themselves that don't feel overly dogmatic and scary, that they are becoming the creator of this and finding ways just into their heart, and helping people get away from this whole like money game that's just a really negative trap, that showing people how money isn't a thing anymore. So that I have a notion about that too. What's happening?
When I contemplate the we,
yeah,
money doesn't make sense. Like that's the thing I resonate with what you're saying is money stops becoming important.
Yeah.
In the we.
Yeah. Wouldn't you just give to yourself if it's the we, and you wouldn't no longer hold back to try to profit from somebody else? There's no benefit for the all there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But collectively, if it's the benefit for the all, like that's what Rich and I have been talking about on occasion around the idea of capitalism. Capitalism is ultimately the profit for me, which is competitive based. What if it switched to cooperative, which is essentially a co-op, but if it's solidified and becomes about the we, how much more effective we could actually be. It would be
effective, attractive, repetitive.
Yes.
Right. It's all these things, right? It's the flywheel that Nick talked about yesterday. It's co-creation. It is iterative and repetitive, and everybody shares in it, right? And so it's amazing. 100%.
Yeah. See, that's what's on my radar is that shift of capitalism.
Yeah.
Because it's a harbinger of it's kind of like that, the grind of most men I know. Yeah. It's like, I still want to make a lot of money, but something's really broken.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I love about Judaism. When I watch them in community, they are a religion, a race, and a community. Right. And watching those communities function and support each other, and then they have different, areas of them, but watching them support each other and how, it's like even somewhat in the Indian culture as well, but really in Judaism, I watch that, and they support each other and they're community aligned, and they go to work, like, and they, and they got each other's backs. And it's like this little organism that has a lot of light, and the way that even the Hebrew language and things are structured, there's stuff in that is like very frequency aligned and oriented to why these things come to them and why it happens, and even why they have some very dark days on the other side. So if we could all kind of look at that as an example of how to build our communities, it starts to shift the way we show up in the world, because there is no more real I. Yeah.
Well, it's what would happen if everyone could start with basic needs, like place to sleep, food to eat, clothes for your back, and the capacity to work, saying, hey, I'm willing to work. I've done the math, and you can scale that down, because if you move to cooperative, you shift away from sales and marketing, which you don't need, because you've got a cooperative agreement for everybody taking care. And then now you're working half the time and you're collaboratively creating beauty and art and experience and adventure that is deeply meaningful. That's my wonder. That's when I sit in the middle of what I call the unified field.
Mm-hmm.
When I walk my dog at night, I just ponder and sit in that space of unity. And what shows up is a world where everyone can thrive because of the agreement of trust that's created through cooperation.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see for my children and my grandchildren.
I love it, dude.
You know, do you
100%.
think 5D is a different world?
Repeat that again.
Do you think 5D is a different world?
No, it's not even, I wouldn't even say it's a world. It's just an energy field. It's just a dimension of understanding around a level of resonance of love that allows for us to play in different dimensions. Right. So if I can, it's like going, it's like going to the store and getting something and bringing it home and making a really beautiful meal. It's just a really amazing ingredient. It allows us to transcend space and time, and it puts a different lens on this 3D to when we look at it, we're not looking at it the way that we have looked at it before. So
is that what they mean by magical moments, Sean? Where it could be something relatively simple, actually, but it actually has something that's meaningful and it stands out. I mean, you think about where there's a vibe and family together. There's a time when it's just, hey, groceries, dinner, go to bed, right? Then there's other times where something happens in the moment and there's this sense of joy that kind of transcends a normal mundane kind of thing. Or is it something different than that? And even like I'm thinking in a negative sense, there's a guy, you might remember, he was the Buddhist monk who set himself on fire to protest, the war, as he's on the Rage Against the Machine album. You guys know that guy, right? And this guy was just sitting completely still. That guy was not in 3D. I mean, that guy was someplace else, right? As his body was being consumed and he was perfectly still, right? I don't know what you want to call that, but is that what you're saying? That it can actually be, it doesn't have to be something like esoteric. It can be something relatively normal, but it actually like a special moment kind of comes in. What do you, maybe flesh that out?
Yeah. So like it's so the even like what you said in the magical is not the logical.
Of course not.
And so to your point, we oftentimes try to reference things from a logical mind, which is why the mind is such it can be a dangerous thing. And so mapping your life, or mapping the things that you witness, of being able to see everything as a miracle, being able to see everything with the lens of magic and awe, which is why children are just like so beautiful to watch, because you're just like watching them and they're just in this awe state about the simplest thing. It's like, yeah, it's great. And then we logically are like, well, it's not, because there's more, but there's not more because that's all that there is. So us being able to move from the mundane, being able to truly see everything as like this magical moment, we start going away from the linearness and trying to create straight lines. And then we start to move in curves. And when you move in curves, you're moving around the thing that hasn't been there. And actually, that's the fastest way, because you're now witnessing things from all different perspectives. You're not just looking at one thing, you're looking at all types of possibilities, right? And there really are no straight lines. It's only the straight lines we create. Even if I look at this wall that has straight lines behind it, every individual cell on that is a circle that makes up the straight line, right? And then that in itself appears that way, but it's only from the construct that, we created it to force it into that, but it's not meant to be that. So it's moving from logical to magical, and then seeing everything with that magical lens and that awe and that reverence. And when you do that, that's when, the simplest thing, this conversation, like what's the most magical thing you've ever had happen in your life? This moment right now. Right.
This is the best podcast ever.
Ever. And then the next one you have will be the best one ever.
This
and then
is
when I get
actually
off
one of my funnest ones, though. Sean, you're so fun to hang out with. I appreciate you, brother, because
likewise,
you look into life very deeply and you're not afraid. I think that's what I appreciate about you, is you're adventurous with your own soul to take risks with love that has profoundly shown up for you. And I love that about you. You're gentle, but you have a deep strength. So I love that you have both sides of the energy. You have a masculine side and you have a feminine side. So I appreciate your voice and what you're trying to do, because what I see on your reels especially is just this desire to help people ascend. I don't even know if that's the right word, but just to see the bigger picture. And I hope to see more of you this year.
So, 100%. Yeah, yeah. We'll have to just get together and figure it out. But no, I appreciate you guys. You were, as I was on this, and I just like even appreciate you initially reaching out. I'll always be a huge supporter and fan of what you guys are doing. And you know, whenever you need me, I'm around. I'm here to, keep loving on each
Absolutely.
other. Yeah.
Love it, man.
Awesome.
So this has been one of our funnest episodes, at least for me. I know it probably is for you, Rich. Sean, thank you for being with us again. And thank you to all of our listeners. This has been a wonderful episode. We've got a lot of amazing people this week that we're interviewing. So those will be rolled out over the next couple days. And Sean, thank you. This has been an awesome one. So much love, everybody.
Yeah. Love you guys. Honored. Thank you so much.